Okay. And we'll have the contact info for all the presenters so you can follow up with them too. And yeah, that concludes our presentations, but we still have time for discussing with our presenters. Um, if you have a question following up on any of their presentations or just about their journeys as scholars, as people, you're definitely welcome to put it in the chat or raise your hand. We'd love to hear and see you as well. To give you a little bit of time to think, we do have a first question for our presenters to start with. Um, it is, what would you say to your ancestors about the work that you're doing? So we did ask you like what kind of ancestor you wanted to be, but this idea of being in conversation with your ancestors. Yeah, who would like to start?
Um, I'll start. I think I would have to explain what a podcast is to my family. And I would say the work I do is an online radio show because that's how I describe it to my mom. But she still has no idea what that means. But and I would say, and I talk to a lot of cool Filipino and Filipino Americans and share our stories.
Thanks, Elaine, that's great.
Yeah, I think Amric talked about the difficulties of describing dissertation research and the process to family. And I connect with that so hard. I just tell my mom I'm doing homework all the time. And it's like so boiled down to like, yeah, I'm doing homework today. They thought I was taking an exam for my defense. And I was like, no, no exam, no test. um, I think I think a lot about those the idea of like cultural artifacts and just being so far removed from where my ancestors came from physically, and what it means to still have this language to be able to um, maybe speak to them if I were to go back in time. And so I think I would really just be thankful for all of my ancestors for really pushing language in our upbringing and how we use that as such a means of communication, but also cultural connection as well. And so yeah, I would say just probably thank you to them too for having this resilience as they've journeyed across oceans, across lands, and really setting a strong foundation to be able to do that. And thinking about my own role as someone who has so much privilege in this life that I have now, and what does that mean to pass on the resilience in the way that I can. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
I would echo Elaine and Susan. They like communicated that better than I could have. I think like just the gratitude and so what Susan said about gratitude, absolutely. I would just say thank you. And then from Elaine's point about just giving an update on what the HAPS is in 2022, I would do that too, like the current state of affairs.
Definitely. So, oh, good. Kevin has a question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so even with the Jeffrey and my gosh, what was her name?
Angie.
Angie, and the three of you shared very distinct research and stories, and I would kind of like the first part might be a little bit challenged, but oftentimes we're kind of separated into like different groups within the PETA greater community, and sometimes we feel isolated, maybe feeling like we're the only Asian of on our campuses and whatnot. But I think there's a shared narrative that comes out from your stories. So even though we come from different backgrounds and experiences, how can we use your stories and narratives to connect, to have a same goal, if that makes sense? Because you all bring very different aspects, but how can you see it connecting with someone else, maybe from one of the presentations, or maybe someone else that you've worked with cross-culturally, ethnically, and kind of like the reason why this is coming up for me is like kind of when Elaine was talking about the podcast, I'm like curious, like, are there any other ethnic groups that are doing these podcasts? Can, you know, Elaine like collaborate with some of these other podcast type people? So that's kind of like the mentality of like, how can we kind of bring this all into one unified voice, if that makes sense.
That's such a complicated question because I as a former Asian American studies like major and I have all these things, like there's a journey you go on where like you think of the diaspora and you think, okay, we're all Asian American, we're all vying for like representation for our community. And then within it, you have to then you go down the line of like, wait, but like my community specifically is not being covered. Like this is, I am here for representation, but then you're not talking about my story, which is not about like a me, but it's kind of like a, but wait a minute, you're not the people who are getting the shine and the flowers on TV. Like they're not representing me. I'm sorry. Like that's not it. I'm happy for them. And I love seeing people like on my screen. Right. But then if it's not like if it's not a Filipino American, like I'll be like, well, that's cool. But like, I at least, but then this is a weird way to put it, but like Filipinos are always on TV. So I'm always just like, whatever, like we're always there. Like someone's always Filipino. But like, if like for Susan who's Tao Chu, like that's probably not going to be something she'll see, you know? So that's like really difficult. And then for like, or to see your community being talked about in a better light as opposed to just always being depressed and like seeing these stories, like especially with like API hate going on right now. Like my bottom always drops when I hear a hate crime story because I'm always worried who the community will be. And like a lot of the time it'll be as Ali Wong puts it, jungle Asians who get the brunt of of what was happening. Like Emmerich pointed it out in his presentation today. And like, so it's just like, it's either you're South Asian or you're Southeast Asian, and then you're going getting attacked. But then you're just like, okay, but then we're all rallying against this, but can we rally on something positive too? Like, why do we have to always be like fighting for, this sounds so sad, but it's like my journey as a community organizer. Why am I always fighting for justice? Like I was a high school, college student fighting for these things, and I'm now like older student affairs professional still fighting for these things through work with through my students. And it's just like, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but what I'm trying to say is that as an Asian American, you always have to wade the waters of the diaspora, and sometimes like dialing it down to like the specific disaggregation of your community is also like the biggest step in order to get your community seen, because otherwise like if there's nothing written about you, it's like you don't exist. And that is just like the biggest thing that my heart hurts when I think that, because it's like we always have to create our lanes for these stories because we're tired of trying to get seats at the table. So we're just building our own tables. And that's what I think is important about this generation, is that we're learning to come into our own, that we don't have to fight for the tables, for seats anymore. Like, I'm not going to fight for a seat. I'm going to create my own table. And then I will invite everybody to my dinner and to my kamayan and to my whatever. Like, I would rather do that. So I hope that answers the question.
Elaine, but don't you think that's I'm here for everything you've just said, but that is also a very difficult intergenerational conversation to have. Like, right?
Absolutely.
Like when we're having a conversation with parents, grandparents, great grandparents who have fought so hard, it's what makes it very complicated and messy, is to have that honest conversation with tears, with love. That allows us to understand that creating that new table doesn't mean anything less. In fact, there's something more to it, if they only let us, right? So
yeah, that's the one I feel for Susan and Amrik as PhD students because I am not in that boat, and Elaine as well, because the journey for you all is, like you said, very lonely, and it's hard to not be able to go to your family and ask for that support, because so much of our stories as API scholars is that you're doing it on your own for so long, and it's just like, and then you get to the point where you get to celebrate the fact that you're going to do your defense. I'm so excited for you guys, but it's just like, I wish that you didn't have to be resilient in order to be successful. Like, can't we just be a community that's successful? I'm tired of having to show off resilience as a positive trait, because resilience is just like what you do to survive. It's not, and like that's something that I wish we didn't have to go through in academia. Like, you shouldn't have to do that.
This is why Elena has a podcast.
Other
Elaine, don't
responses and
cry.
reactions, to Elaine's brilliance and nuggets of wisdom, pearls of wisdom.
It's because it's not research based and I don't have to do a study and I don't have to like try and code anything.
It's funny, I was reflecting on talking to my parents about my study and trying to explain what I was doing. And they were very confused. And I actually, for part of my dissertation, I actually interviewed my parents to talk about their immigration journeys and transcribe that into my first chapter to open my dissertation. And it's interesting how far removed they are from their refugee journeys, but there's still this like inherent fear of like, my dad was like, oh, what are you saying in this? Like, don't say that, say this, because if the government reads your dissertation, like they'll be angry at you. And I'm like, what government is reading my dissertation, first of all? But like also, like, no, like you need to have your story told, and that's why this is important. I don't even know the original question from Kevin, but I think like overall, I think it's so important, especially when we get to positions of being able to encourage, study and scholarship, that we are encouraging folks to research their own people, because those are the voices that aren't being heard. And I remember early on in my literature review, I was like talking to one of my committee members, and I was like, I can't find anything. Like, is that even a legit study? And she's like, you're doing this because you can't find anything, and you have to center that as why you're doing this. And so I think just having this mindfulness across cultures, especially in the roles that we have in higher education.
I think, Susan, so much of what you're saying resonates with me in terms of, again, I can't help but think intergenerational inheritances, where representation is the inheritance that we have generated, that we've received from ancestors, but it cannot be an endpoint. It must be the place from which we begin. It must be the place from which we deepen, render more multidimensional the kinds of narratives, more intersectional. Like Amrika, like when you talked a little bit about, Leah Lakshmi's like orientation and their grounding of writing the poem, it renders, it doesn't flatten or reduce a Desi experience. In fact, what it does is it renders it more complex and multidimensional. And how do we do that? And how do we do that consistently, so that to the 2-year-old, 3-year-old, the 13-year-old, or the 15-year-old watching, when they get to university and beyond, that they can imagine writing the next dissertation for our communities. If there's anything I would say to you is continue to break those barriers. One of the things I did in my dissertation was unapologetically use Hindi words in Hindi script to write and get the point across. Untranslated, did not care, and said, if you find yourself wondering what the word is, look it up. Like, I ain't translating it for you if you're outside of the community. So to find ways that kind of locate but honor the legacy of ancestors becomes really, really important. And there are ways to push it. And if you need support in how to sell it to a committee member that might be like, what is this? There are plenty of us around. There are plenty of us that will fluff you up, prop you up, and give you the language to break down those barriers. Because today it is you. Tomorrow someone is just waiting to see you do it, so that's permission giving for them. So more power to all of you for doing the work that you do and continuing to blaze and open doors for those that come after.
That resonated, Dirk, and thank you. And I would also respond to Kevin's very hard question. It took me like 10 minutes to like figure out how to contribute, but I think the way we cite in our papers and who we cite is like, it's inherently a political act. So to create connection with each other, citing the right people that identify with the diaspora as Asian, Pacific Islander, Indigenous, and Desi could help create the connection, because there's all these canonical authors and researchers that everyone cites, right? But they tend to be white and male. So like, yes, I get that our committees might be like, hey, it's a good best practice, but we are at the keyboard typing, so we could also take the step to be like, who else in the field is doing it, to create the connection between each other. Yeah.
Thank you all, and sorry if there's barking. But it really helps, because even with the white LinkedIn, when I see people on TV or just literature, I'm like, oh, Korean. I'm like, that's me. But even sometimes that's not going to resonate with me. But maybe I'll resonate with some of the things that you've all shared as well in different ways. So I think just going through the dissertation process, eventually I got to figure out what I'm going to write about and stuff. We have a lot of researchers and practitioners. Sometimes we're the only Asian, so we have to kind of almost represent everyone. But I'm like, I can't do that. But there's I don't want to fail, our students and even staff and faculty as well. So hearing all of your responses to we're going to get through this, together as well. But it's okay to kind of learn from our identities and our experiences individually. That definitely resonates. Hard question, but you all nailed it. Thank you.
That was epic. Thank you for all of that and giving me some time to reprocess that down. We are coming to a close of this year's Scholars Collective. We did record, so we'll be able to have recordings for those who couldn't make it. And for each of our presenters, we are gifting them a copy of Leah Lakshmi's book. And so we're going to send that to you. We're actually going to handwrite some stuff. So it'll take a while. I might hand deliver it to my friends on the West Coast. So maybe expect a little visit from me. And so thank you for sharing your work, sharing your stories. This Scholars Collective, it's sort of what we make it. And we really hope that you felt like we broke down a couple of the walls of academia and made some connections to keep sustaining. There are a bunch of things that APIKC has stuff to do and stuff to move forward. Dirk, Aaron, would you mind giving a quick rundown of our sort of announcements and APIKC stuff?
Sure, I can go first. So now that we finished Scholars Collective, and there's been a lot of great energy around some of the narratives and stories that you've presented around wanting to change things up within higher education, one of the things that we hope to be doing as the research and scholarship team moving forward is putting out a proposal for a book. So for those of you who might be using the NASPA's Asian Pacific Islanders in higher education book, it's the purple-ish book. I always mean to have the copy to show. Maybe Elaine, Jessica, you have yours. It'll be celebrating 10 years, and we want to uplift and show, there you go, that book, and show the changes and the more nuanced conversations we're having about our community, like the ones that are 5 presenters have presented today. So we hope that, as things wind down in the semester or quarter and you find some time to for rest and respite, once you're rejuvenated, you can find time to submit a proposal. This more information will be available on our Instagram and social media, and we'll also send it out to our newsletter. If you're not getting our newsletter, make sure that you are that you select that you want to be part of the APIKC on your NASPA membership, so that you can be getting the information from our co-chairs and our team. And I'll pass it to Dirk.
We continue to strike writing circles, call it a writing circle, an accountability group, whether you're working on a dissertation, an article, and we're looking at Susan, and I know that you're not writing the dissertation anymore, but if you're going to be writing from the dissertation, to be able to welcome you and to do whatever piece of writing or any kind of brainstorming. Writing can be many, many things. And so we have, at this time, we have 3 different slots that we offer. We will be putting out what our summer is going to look like. We're bringing some of our winter term slots to a close, but look out for our writing circles as offered through the APIKC. It becomes a supportive space for you to advance some of your work, but also to do it in a way that is accountable and with people who love, care, and can prop you up, because that's what this is about. It's about cultural production at its finest. So join us.
All right, I'll take the last one. If you want to get more involved with APIKC, you're definitely welcome to join our committee, the Research and Scholarship Committee. We're, planning events like this, working on the book proposal, things like that, building up community of scholars. There are also vacancies in the APIKC leadership team. Quite a few of the regional reps cycled off because we do have they make sure that not everybody has to cycle off at the same time. So if you are from any of those regions, 1, 4 East, 4 West, or 6, and we also have different sub-reps of Region 6, SoCal, NorCal, and Hawaii. Please let us know if you're interested. You can contact any of us on the L team or go on the NASPA engagement portal to submit an application. All right, I think that's all right. Okay. Thank you again so much to our presenters. This is awesome. Yes.
Thank you so much for being in community with us, folks.